Welcome to Her Remarkable History. Remember, to support our channel, please subscribe. The Virgin Queen's fatal problem, the death of Amy Robsart. Queen Elizabeth I is regarded as the Virgin Queen for the fact she never married and never had a child, but it's believed her keen favourite was Robert Dudley, the Earl of Leicester. There have been many rumours that she and Dudley were intimate, but the Queen would profess that she remained married to her country. But what isn't as well known about Dudley is that whilst the Queen's eye was being captured by the dashing courtier, that he was already married. But there was a huge scandal that gripped Tudor court, as on the 8th of September 1560, Amy Robsart, or Lady Dudley, would be found dead at the bottom of the stairs in Cumnor Place in Oxfordshire. There were many rumours about the fact her husband may have murdered her to solidify a marriage with Elizabeth I, with Amy out of the way. There was even shocking rumours that Elizabeth I was involved in the plot to murder Amy, Lady Dudley. But what is the story of the Virgin Queen's fatal problem? 3 days before her 18th birthday, Amy Robsart married Robert Dudley, the son of the Earl of Warwick. The pair were the same age, and the wedding contract was based heavily on gifts from their fathers. The marriage was celebrated with Edward VI in attendance, and Robert's father was the most powerful man in England, meaning that the couple were important across the country also. They lived mostly at court or with Amy's parents-in-law at Ely House, and then Robert Dudley became the keeper of Somerset House in London. However, following the debacle involving Lady Jane Grey, the 9-day Queen, Robert Dudley was imprisoned inside the Tower of London, as he was linked to Jane, and he was actually sentenced to death and was imprisoned inside the Tower of London. However, he was released, and he was then short of money, and the couple lived a modest life. Following the death of Amy's parents, the couple inherited the Robsart estate with the Queen's permission, and in the summer of 1558, the pair were looking for a suitable residence in Norfolk to live. But then Mary I died, and when Elizabeth I became Queen, Robert became Master of the Horse, and he was almost constantly at court and was very close to the Queen, Elizabeth I. By the April of 1559, Elizabeth seemed deeply in love with Robert, and many diplomats said that she would marry him if his wife should die, as it was reported that Amy was suffering with breast cancer. Robert would never leave the Queen's side, and he visited his wife for a few days at Easter in 1559, and then she came to London in May for a month. It was written that her health had improved. However, around this time, there were many foreign princes who wanted to marry Elizabeth I, but the Queen only had eyes for Robert Dudley, and there were rumours that Dudley was poisoning his wife so that he could marry the Queen, and it was said, keeping Lord Robert's enemies and the country engaged with words until the wicked deed of killing his wife and consummated. Many of the nobility blamed Dudley for the fact Elizabeth did not marry, and some people planned to assassinate him. He was contemplating divorcing his wife for Elizabeth, but Lady Amy Dudley would never see her husband again following the visit to London, and from December of 1559 she lived at Cumnor Place in Oxfordshire. Amy lived very comfortably in a large house, and she received a lot of money from her inheritance, and she regularly ordered beautiful and expensive dresses, and also presents from her husband. However, on the 8th of September 1560, Amy Robsart was found dead at the foot of a set of stairs at Cumnor Place. Whilst her husband was with the Queen at Windsor, he was told of his wife's death, and he immediately was desperate to find out what happened, and he called for an inquest. Dudley was told that his wife had woken up early and would not that day suffer one of her own sort to tarry at home, and was so earnest to have them gone to the fair that with any of her own sort that made reason of tarrying at home, she was very angry and came to Mrs. Odlingshells, who refused that day to go to the fair, and was very angry with her also, because Mrs. Odlingshells said it was no day for gentlewomen to go, whereunto my lady answered and said that she might choose and go at her own pleasure, but all hers should go, and was very angry. They asked who should keep her company if all they went. She said Mrs. Owen should keep her company at dinner. Then Same Deltoff Pictou, who doth dearly love her, confirm, certainly, my lord, as little while I have been here, I have heard divers tales of her that maketh me judge her to be a strange woman of mind. Mrs. Pictou was her maid, and the question of whether her death was an accident or not was raised. It was then said, She said by her faith she doth judge very chance, and neither done by man nor by herself. For herself, she said, she was a good virtuous gentlewoman, and daily would pray upon her knees, and divers times she saith that she had heard her pray to God to deliver her from desperation. Then said, she might have an evil toy, suicide, in her mind. No, good Mr. Blount, said Pictou, do not judge son of my words, if you should go gather. I am sorry I said so much, my lord. It is most strange that this chance should fall unto you. It passeth the judgment of any man to say how it is. But truly the tales I do hear of her maketh me to think she had a strange mind in her, as I will tell you at my coming. The coroner and 15 jurors were gathered, and the jury were assured that her death seemed to be an accident. Dudley did not want to have his reputation damaged by rumours that he killed Amy, which were constantly flying around court, and he asked for more knowledge of her death to be found. The coroner's verdict was that Amy Dudley, being alone in a certain chamber, accidentally fell down the adjoining stairs to the very bottom, and sustained 2 head injuries, one to the depth of 1/4 thumb, the other to the depth of 2 thumbs. She had also, by reason of the accidental injury, or of the fall, and of Lady Amy's own body weight falling down the stairs, broken her neck, on which account the same Lady Amy then and there died instantly, and by misfortune came to her death, and not otherwise. So the contemporary courts believed that she slipped down the stairs, hit her head twice, and broke her neck, killing her straight away, and they did not believe any foul play was to blame. After her death there were many rumours that the Queen and her favourite caused grievous and dangerous suspicion and muttering across the country, and that the pair plotted to kill Amy Dudley. William Cecil was worried about the threat of Dudley, and he would speak out against him. However, Cecil would spread rumours about the pair plotting Amy Robsart's death. Others went out of their way to draw attention to the scandalous gossip, and the rumours even reached royal courts across the continent. Robert Dudley would briefly leave court, and he would return a few months later in great hope of marrying the Queen, and the Queen's affection to him had not warmed and had grown incredibly strong. However, Elizabeth's reputation was damaged by the scandal, and she eventually became convinced that she could not risk a marriage with Dudley. Dudley knew his own reputation was being destroyed, and he said, God's will be done. I wish he had made me the poorest that creepeth on the ground, so this mischance had not happened to me. He would rather have lost his wealth and status than be known as a man who murdered his wife to marry the Queen. Many theories and writers wrote about it, and one account said, the Lord Robert's wife brake her neck at Foster's house in Oxfordshire, her gentlewoman being gone forth to a fair. Howbeit it was though she was slain, for Sir Varney was there that day, and whilst the deed was doing, was going over the fair, and tarried there for his man, who at length came, and he said, Ay, thou knave, what tarries thou? He answered, Should I come before I had done? Hast thou done? Quoth Varney. Yea, quoth the man, I have made it sure, many times before it was buried by the Lord Robert, his men, that she was dead. This Varney and divers his servants used before her death to wish her death, which made the people to suspect the worse. Further writers would criticise Robert Dudley and the Queen for conspiring to kill Amy Robsart, so the two would be free to marry. As a widow this would not have been a scandal, as if the Queen would have married a divorced man. There are a number of modern theories, including that Amy took her own life from desperation, and the fact she was very ill, or also by desperation. As her husband was growing distant, this could have played an impact. Another theory is that Amy may have been suffering with breast cancer. Her skeleton could have been made weaker by her body struggling to fight the disease, and that her neck snapped under the weight of the fall. Some modern historians have considered that she was murdered, being pushed down the stairs, but much of this was based on speculation and gossip at the royal court. The death of Amy Robsart was a brutal and horrific event in Tudor England that caused a huge degree of damage to the Queen of England and her rumoured love interest. At the heart of this was a shunned wife who was being cast aside in her husband's affections for the Queen of England, and the most powerful woman in the land. Her death was one which was tragic, but Elizabeth I would be put off marrying the man she loved forever, due to the damage of her reputation. Dudley would never really recover from this damage, and he would later marry again. However, this also upset the Queen greatly. Thank you for watching, and to support, please subscribe to Her Remarkable History. Thank you.